One of the most common things I hear from parents of 3-year-olds is, "My child never used to act like this." Maybe they're arguing about everything, refusing simple requests, throwing tantrums over things that don't seem important, demanding things be done a very specific way, saying no to things they actually want, then asking for it, then refusing again. And many parents start to wonder, what happened to my sweet child? Or worse, is something wrong with my child? Because we're taught that 2-year-olds are the ones to watch out for, when in reality, 3-year-olds are a whole different ballgame. Welcome to Kid Logic Labs. I'm Leanne, and you're in the Parent Lab. The truth of the matter is that many of the behaviors parents find most frustrating at age 3 are actually signs of healthy development. Now, that's not to say every behavior is acceptable, and it's certainly not to say parenting a 3-year-old is easy. Trust me, I like to joke that I've basically been living in toddler town since 2019. My 4 girls are spaced closely enough that as soon as one toddler graduated, another one took her place. I've had a front row seat to the 3-nager years for a very long time, and no, I'm not okay. Please send help. In all seriousness though, before we label a behavior as defiance, disrespect, oppositional behavior, or a sign that something is wrong, we need to understand what's happening developmentally. Because 3-year-olds are going through a major shift. For the first time, they're beginning to realize that they're separate people from us. They have their own thoughts, their own opinions, their own preferences, and most importantly, their own choices. This is the age where kids begin to develop a stronger sense of autonomy. In other words, I can do it myself. I want to decide. I have an opinion. And while that sounds wonderful in theory, it often looks pretty messy in real life. Because your child is discovering independence long before they've developed the skills needed to manage it gracefully. Suddenly, everything becomes a negotiation. The shoes, the cup, the snack, the route you drive home, the color of the toothbrush, the order of the bedtime routine. To parents, it can feel like their child is intentionally creating problems. But from a developmental perspective, something very different is happening. Your child is experimenting with control. They're trying to understand, what choices do I get to make? What happens if I say no? Do my preferences matter? Can I influence my world? Those are important questions for a developing child. The challenge is that they often explore those questions at the least convenient times possible. Now, there's another reason this stage can be particularly confusing. 3-year-olds are becoming much more verbal. Their vocabulary is exploding. They're speaking in longer sentences. They're expressing more complex ideas. And because they sound older, we often assume they understand more than they actually do. I see this all the time. A child speaks confidently, answers questions, seems to be following the conversation, and it's easy to forget that their understanding is still very limited compared to an older child. I've even had moments in therapy where I've spent several minutes explaining something to a child. They nodded the whole time, they seemed engaged, and then I stopped and asked, "Do you know what that means?" And they looked at me and they said no. Just because children can say the words doesn't mean they fully understand the concepts behind them, and that matters. Because many of the expectations we place on children come from what we hear rather than what they're developmentally capable of. We hear sophisticated language and assume sophisticated self-control. We hear good communication and assume mature reasoning, but those skills develop at different rates. A child can explain exactly what they want and still be completely unable to tolerate disappointment. They can understand a rule and still struggle to follow it. They can know what they're supposed to do and still have a meltdown when things don't go their way. That's not manipulation. That's development. And this is where many parents start to become concerned. Sometimes parents come into therapy worried that their child is stubborn, oppositional, defiant, or constantly pushing limits. And while there are certainly times when behaviors deserve further evaluation, there are also many times when what parents are seeing is a completely normal developmental phase. The problem is that when we misunderstand development, normal behavior starts to look abnormal. And when normal behavior starts looking abnormal, parenting becomes much more stressful. Because now you're not dealing with a 3-year-old. You're dealing with a 3-year-old that you believe shouldn't be acting like a 3-year-old. And that's exhausting. So what can we do? One of the most effective things we can do is give children appropriate opportunities for control. Not unlimited control, but appropriate control. Offer choices whenever possible. Would you like the blue cup or the red cup? Would you like to walk to the car or hop like a bunny? Would you like to put your shoes on first or your coat on first? When kids have the opportunity to exercise independence in safe ways, they're often less likely to seek control through power struggles. Another strategy is choosing your battles carefully. Not every behavior requires a correction. Not every annoyance requires intervention. Not every eye roll from a 3-year-old needs to become a teaching moment. Some behaviors need limits, some need redirection, and some simply need us to remember they're 3. Finally, remember that your child is learning how to handle frustration by watching you handle frustration. When everything feels like a battle, it's easy for our own nervous systems to become overloaded. And when we become overloaded, our patience shrinks, our flexibility shrinks, our frustration tolerance gets lower, and the same thing happens to our kids. The difference is that we expect ourselves to struggle sometimes, but we don't always extend that same understanding to them. So if you're in the middle of a teenager stage right now, here is something I want you to remember. Your child isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time learning how to be an independent person. Their job right now is to practice autonomy. Their job is to develop preferences. Their job is to test the boundaries of their world. And your job isn't to eliminate that process. Your job is to guide it. Because when we understand what's developmentally normal, we stop asking, what's wrong with my child? And start asking, what is my child trying to learn right now? And that question often changes everything. Thank you so much for joining me in the lab today. You're doing great.
Thanks again for joining me in the lab. If this video helped you better understand your child, give it a like and subscribe to my channel so we can keep learning and growing together.